Hi, and welcome to Drupal Brief. This is an AI-generated brief of another video, podcast, or blog post. If you want to learn more about what's being discussed here, then please go check out the source. This podcast is produced by the team at Drupal Forge. We would love to create more AI-generated briefs like this. Please contact Salim Lakhani on Drupal Slack or LinkedIn and let him know what else you want us to cover. Oh, and if you have not tried Drupal Forge yet, you're missing out. You'll be able to do twice as much in half the time. So go check it out. Okay, that's it. Make sure to click subscribe. And here we go.
Okay, so welcome to another deep dive, where we really like to dig into a specific source and pull out all the good stuff.
Yeah, just the gems, the things you really need to know.
Exactly. And today we are diving into a specific issue of a newsletter. It's called The Weekly Drop.
Okay.
And this is issue 673. And this one is dated March 13th, 2025.
Okay, familiar with that one.
Yeah, and this is like the go-to newsletter for Drupal news and updates.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It covers a lot of ground.
It really does. Yeah, it's got, headlines, articles, tutorials, releases, even mentions of like podcasts, events, job listings.
Yeah.
All related to Drupal, of course.
Yeah, you can really get a sense of what's going on in Drupal land just by browsing through it.
Absolutely. So, our mission today is to take this whole issue and kind of condense it down to the really important things.
Yeah.
So you, the listener, can get up to speed quickly without, spending a ton of time reading through the whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, there's some real gold in there, but it does take a while to sift through it all.
It does. So we're going to try to make it easy for you. And some of the interesting things we're going to touch on today. There's a headline that caught my eye about Drupal CMS leadership changes.
Oh.
There's the ongoing saga of Drupal 7 end-of-life support.
Oh, yeah.
We've got some interesting technical updates coming out in Drupal core. DrupalCon Atlanta is coming up, and there's all kinds of buzz around that.
Yeah, I saw that.
And then just, a bunch of different resources that we think might be valuable for Drupal users and developers.
Sounds good. Yeah, let's dive in.
Okay, so the first thing that really jumped out at me was on the Drupal blog. There's a headline: Drupal CMS leadership changes.
Okay, yeah.
Now the newsletter doesn't give us any specifics like who's coming or going, but that title alone just makes me think something big is brewing at the top of the Drupal project.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Changes at the leadership level can have a pretty big impact on the direction of the project, the whole community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just makes you wonder, how things might change down the line.
Right, exactly. What are the priorities going to be moving forward?
Yeah.
We'll have to see what the specifics are.
Yeah. Now, one theme that keeps popping up in this issue is the whole Drupal 7 end-of-life situation.
Right.
And there's a prominent sponsorship message from Tag One. They're offering post-EOL support for Drupal 7 sites.
Okay.
And they've got this tagline: post-EOL doesn't have to mean post-security.
That's interesting.
And I thought that was really interesting because it acknowledges that, there are still a lot of sites out there running on Drupal 7.
Oh, yeah.
Totally. And, for organizations that maybe aren't ready to migrate to a newer version yet, this kind of support offers a way to at least maintain security without, having to do a big, complex migration right away.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's like they're saying, look, we get it.
Yeah.
You might need some more time and we can help you bridge that gap.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not just Tag One. We also see a sponsored article from Optasy, and they've got a much more direct approach. They're saying, time to break up with Drupal 7 will help you move on.
Wow.
And they're actually offering a free audit to help with the migration. They even make this analogy, sticking with an outdated site is like staying in a bad relationship. It's only going to get worse.
Okay. Yeah, I can see
So,
it.
they're really kind of driving home the point that, at some point you've got to move on from Drupal 7.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's like anything else. Technology moves on. You don't want to be left behind using something that's no longer supported.
Right. Yeah, you're going to run into security risks, compatibility issues, and eventually it's just going to become more and more of a headache.
Yeah, and that free audit that Optasy is offering, that's a really good way for organizations to kind of take that first step.
Exactly. Yeah, it gives them a chance to see what's involved in a migration and what the potential costs or benefits might be.
Right. And then, they can start planning accordingly.
Yeah. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit and talk about some of the technical updates that are happening in Drupal core.
Okay.
And there are quite a few changes here that developers will want to be aware of. So the first one is a new debug dump extension for PHP Unit. Now I know a lot of our listeners are probably not developers, but just to give a quick explanation, PHP Unit is a tool that developers use to automatically test their code.
Right. Yeah. It's really important for catching errors and making sure that everything works as expected.
Exactly. And so this new extension sounds like it's going to make it easier for developers to kind of see what's going on when those tests fail.
Okay, so it gives them more information to work with.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really helpful for troubleshooting and fixing problems.
Yeah, it can save a lot of time and frustration
Yeah.
in trying to figure out what went wrong.
Absolutely. Another change that's mentioned is a class loader with support for moving deprecating classes. Now, this one's a little bit more technical, but you can think of the Drupal code base as like a giant library, with all these different pieces of code that are like books.
Okay.
And the class loader is kind of like the librarian who's responsible for finding and organizing those books when they're needed.
Right.
So this update is going to make it easier to move those books around or even retire old books, as Drupal evolves.
Oh, okay. So it's like keeping the library organized and up to date.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's done in a way that doesn't disrupt everything else.
Right. That makes sense.
Another change that we see is display classes for all description elements in formelement.html.twig.
Okay.
Now, this one's really for the folks who are working on the look and feel of Drupal sites, the front-end developers.
Okay.
And specifically, this is about those little help texts or descriptions that you see on forms.
Right.
So this update is going to give developers more control over how those descriptions are styled.
Oh, okay. So they can make them match the design of the website more closely.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all about having more fine-grained control over the user interface.
Yeah, that's great.
There's also a new key submit button added to type button, which seems pretty straightforward. It's just, more options for customizing those submit buttons.
Right.
And then we see that performance data get cache tag checksum count and get cache tags valid count deprecated.
Okay.
So deprecated basically means that these functions are being phased out.
Right.
And eventually they're going to be removed from Drupal core. So developers need to start using the newer alternatives.
Okay. So it's a heads up to make some changes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a warning that, these functions are going away. So you need to start planning for that.
Yeah, makes sense.
Now this next one is a pretty big change for anyone who manages a Drupal site. It says the UI for updating modules and themes via the admin interface has been removed. So that means you're no longer going to be able to just click a button in the Drupal admin area to update your site. Core or modules or themes, you're going to have to use command line tools like Drush or Composer.
Right.
So this is a pretty significant shift in how updates are handled.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit more technical.
Yeah.
Not everyone's comfortable using the command line.
Right. But it is considered a more robust and reliable way to do updates.
Right. Especially for larger or more complex websites.
Yeah, exactly. And it also aligns with modern web development practices, where these kinds of tools are becoming more and more common.
Yeah, it's definitely the trend.
Okay, so moving on to something a little bit more fun. DrupalCon Atlanta 2025 is coming up.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of buzz around this event.
Yeah, I saw a few things about it in the newsletter.
Yeah, and the Drupal Association blog has 3 posts specifically highlighting different summits that are happening.
Okay.
So there's the nonprofit summit, there's the government summit, and then there's even one titled, Why Marketers Should Pack Their Bags for DrupalCon Atlanta 2025.
Interesting. So they're really targeting a wide range of attendees.
Yeah, it shows how diverse the Drupal community is and how Drupal can be used for so many different things.
Yeah, it's not just for techies anymore.
Exactly. There's also a sponsored mention for Amazy.io.
Okay.
And they're going to have a booth at DrupalCon Atlanta. And they mentioned they're interested in enterprise-level Drupal hosting questions around Drupal and AI.
Okay.
And this is what really caught my eye, personalized pet tags.
Pet tags?
Yeah, that's what they said.
Wow, that's different.
It's a very memorable way to get people to your booth.
It is, yeah. It's definitely creative.
Yeah. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the articles that are highlighted in the newsletter.
Yep.
There's a really positive piece from the One by Internet blog titled, Drupal England's Heart is Back Beating Strong.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah, it sounds like the Drupal community in England is really thriving.
Yeah, I mean, it's always good to see strong local communities. They really contribute a lot to the overall Drupal ecosystem.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's also an update on Views data export, sprint force summary from computerminds.co.uk.
Okay.
Now, Views is a really powerful tool in Drupal for displaying and organizing content.
Yes, it's one of the most popular modules.
Exactly. And so this article is about a module that lets you export data from Views.
Right.
So this is a useful update for anyone who needs to get that data out into other formats.
Yeah, I can see that being very useful.
Yeah. Now, this next one I thought was really interesting. It's a question posed by Drupalize Me, Drupal CMS docs. Should we combine the CMS and user guides?
That's a good question.
Yeah, and it gets to the heart of, how we document and help people learn how to use Drupal.
Right.
So the question is, should we have like one big set of documentation for everyone, or should we separate it out for, developers and content editors?
Yeah, because, developers need very specific technical information. But content editors just need to know how to use the interface.
Exactly. Yeah. So there are pros and cons to both approaches.
Yeah, having everything in one place could be convenient.
Right.
But it could also be very overwhelming. If you're a content editor and you're suddenly confronted with all this technical jargon.
Right. Yeah. It's a tough one.
Yeah, it's definitely something to think about.
Yeah. We also see a very practical guide from Droptica on selling courses online in a store on Drupal.
Okay.
So this is a specific example of how you can use Drupal for e-commerce and online learning.
Right. Yeah. Drupal is so versatile, you can really build all kinds of things with it.
Yeah, it's not just for websites anymore.
Exactly.
The Drop Times has 2 articles that caught my eye. The first one is Open Source Has No Borders.
Okay.
And this one's all about the global and inclusive nature of open source software, which Drupal is a part of.
Right. Yeah. That's one of the great things about open source is that anyone can contribute no matter where they're from.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the second article is Top Drupal CMS SEO Modules for Better Search Rankings and Site Optimization.
Okay.
And this one is very practical. It gives you a list of modules that can help improve your website's SEO.
Yeah, SEO is so important these days.
Yeah.
People can't find your website on Google. You're in trouble.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Then we have a couple of blog posts from Wim Leers.
Okay.
And he's focusing on previews, patterns and pages, and the move away from dizzying drag and drop.
Okay.
So these posts are really about improving the content editing experience in Drupal.
Right. Yeah. Making it more user-friendly is always a good thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the tutorial section, which is always full of good stuff.
Okay.
Golem's GUB has a great overview of media content management in Drupal 9.
Oh.
So
Okay.
this is all about dealing with images, videos, and other files on your Drupal site.
Right. Yeah. Media management is so important these days.
It is, yeah. And Drupal 9 has some really powerful tools for handling all of that. We also have a tutorial from joshix.in on how to update Drupal core modules and themes with Composer and Drush.
Right.
And this is becoming an essential skill and now that we can't do updates through the admin interface anymore.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a learning curve, but once you get the hang of it, it's really not that bad.
Yeah, and it's much more reliable.
Absolutely.
Ellen Webworks has 2 tutorials that are focused on improving website performance.
Okay.
And one is on Drupal Performance Unlocked, expert caching practices for lightning-fast websites. And the other one is on enhancing Drupal performance with PHP 8.1 fibers.
Okay.
So website speed is always a big concern,
Yeah.
right?
Nobody wants to wait for a slow website to load.
Exactly. And these tutorials go into some pretty advanced techniques for making your Drupal site faster.
Right. Yeah. Caching is really important for that.
It is, yeah. And PHP 8.1 fibers are a new feature in the PHP programming language that can also help with performance. SpecB has a tutorial on how the block ID module can improve your block management in Drupal.
Okay.
And blocks are those different content areas you see on a web page, like navigation menus, sidebars.
Right.
So this module gives you more control over how those blocks are arranged and managed.
Okay, so it helps keep things organized.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. And then there's a more niche tutorial on keeping your Raspberry Pi online with watchdogs.
Okay.
Now, this one's not strictly Drupal related, but it might be interesting for some of our listeners who use Raspberry Pis for development or testing.
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay, so moving on to the releases section. section, we see a bunch of new versions of contributed modules.
Okay.
Things like AI, custom field, email registration, fences, OIDC, permissions by term, TIFA, all being updated. We also have new releases of Drupal core itself, 10.4.4 and 11.1.4.
Okay.
And then there's some deprecation notices for editor load and filed get content headers.
Right.
Which, again, means that those functions are being phased out.
Yeah, so developers need to be aware of that.
Absolutely, yeah. The podcasts section mentions the Lullabot podcast, which has an episode on the Shadow DOM frontend.dark side.
Okay.
And this one's for the front-end developers out there.
Right.
And then Talking Drupal has an episode on Pantheon Content Publisher, which is all about content workflows.
Okay.
So those are both good resources for diving deeper into those specific topics.
Yeah, podcasts are a great way to stay up to date on all the latest stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. The events section is promoting Drupal Camp Asheville, which is happening in July of 2025.
Okay.
And they're putting out a call for sessions and trainings.
Yeah.
So if you have some Drupal expertise to share, this is your chance.
Yeah, those Drupal camps are always a lot of fun.
They are, yeah. It's a great way to connect with other people in the community.
Absolutely.
And finally, we have the jobs section, which mentions that there are Drupal job listings available on jobs.drupal.org.
Okay.
And they've featured a few specific roles: full stack Drupal engineer, lead Drupal developer, DevOps, full stack developer.
So there's still a lot of demand for Drupal talent.
Yeah, it seems like it.
It's good to know.
Yeah. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the weekly drop issue 673.
Wow. We covered a lot of ground.
We did, yeah. But hopefully this has given you a good overview of what's happening in the Drupal world.
I think so.
We saw potential leadership changes, the ongoing Drupal 7 migration saga, lots of technical updates, excitement around DrupalCon Atlanta, and tons of valuable resources.
Yeah, it's a really exciting time to be involved with Drupal.
It is, yeah, and it's moving fast.
It is.
So I'm curious, thinking about everything we've discussed today, what do you see as the biggest opportunity or challenge facing Drupal in the coming year?
That's a tough one. I think one of the biggest opportunities is to make Drupal more accessible to a wider range of users. Not just developers, but content editors, marketers, even just everyday people who want to build a website.
Right.
So making it easier to use, more intuitive, that's a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
But the challenge there is to do that without sacrificing the power and flexibility that Drupal is known for.
Right. Yeah. You don't want to alienate the developers who've been using Drupal for years.
Exactly. So it's a balancing act, finding that sweet spot where Drupal is both powerful and easy to use.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, that's a lot to think about.
It is. Yeah.
So that brings us to the end of this deep dive. Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
And if there are any other topics or sources you'd like us to explore in future deep dives, please let us know.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Okay, until next time.
See ya.
All right. What did you think? Did the AI-generated thing work for you? Let us know. Anyway, to close off this podcast, I just wanted to remind you that this brief was a fully AI-generated summary, and we take no credit for the original content. If you want more AI-generated summaries like this, then let us know. Contact Salim Lakhani on Drupal Slack or LinkedIn. By the way, we're automating the entire process from start to finish, so these briefs can be generated hands-free and on schedule. You want something else covered? We're happy to do it for you. This brief was brought to you by Drupal Forge. Drupal Forge is the new #1 platform to try, demo, and develop Drupal sites, and it is completely free to use. It is a community-supported, non-profit platform run by volunteers, just like yourself. Come join us.